Hey everyone, I've recently been teaching my friend Java after he said that the other tutorials he've looked at were a little bit too slow and guided for him, and he would rather just jump straight into a project. So, this tutorial series is aimed to be a crash course and really quickly teach you the stuff so that you can get straight into your first project. If that sounds like something for you, let's get straight into it. For this tutorial, I'll be using Eclipse IDE or Integrated Development Environment. You can use anything for Java as long as you can edit on it, but I'll be using Eclipse for this tutorial. So first, let's create a project. So to do that, I'll press this Create a Java Project. And then I can name the project whatever I want. So I'll just name it Test Project. I'll just set it all to the defaults. So I'll just say Finish. And then in this source folder right here, I'll right click again, and then I'll say new, and then say class. So this is the Java file that all of our code will be written in for this tutorial. So I'll name it whatever I want. I'll name it main, and then I'll check this checkbox that says public static void main args string args. So this will also create a main method within this class. So when I press finish, you'll see that the Java file has been created. And within this main class, there's this public static void main right here. So this function is actually where all the code starts. So if I press run, anything within these curly braces right here will be ran. I actually have a Java file though for this tutorial already so that I can just follow along with that. So I'm going to import that into my project. You can download this file in the link in the description at my GitHub. So all you have to do is take this and then drag it into the test project package right here. And then it'll show up with this prompt and you just press OK. And then you can press overwrite if you want. Once you get to this screen, there will be an error. That's because the package doesn't match up in this file because it's in the test project package, but I don't have it declared like that here. So just press this icon right here and then say add package declaration test project right here. And then all the errors will be solved. And you can just run and you can see that it runs. So for our first lesson, let's learn about comments and variables. So first, comments. If I do two dashes like this or two slashes like this, this is a comment. So this is a single line comment actually. So anything after these two slashes won't affect the running of the code. They're just a note. So comments are nice so that say if I write a block of code, I can write what it does or thoughts I was having when writing it so that if I come back to it on a later date, like a year later, I'll actually know what I was thinking or what I was doing in that block of code. This really helps with the readability. Next, I have these multi-line comments. So all that's needed for a multi-line comment is a slash and a star to start the comment, and then a star and a slash to end it. Eclipse automatically has these stars all throughout, so if I create more lines, you can see that there's a star created at every single enter, but this isn't actually needed. Anything within these two symbols will be commented out and won't affect the code. The stars are just added for readability. You'll be seeing a lot of comments throughout this series just because I put comments pretty much everywhere to clarify what each line does. So now that we have comments out of the way, let's move on to variables. Variables are kind of the backbone of programming. They let us store values and modify them inside the code. Specifically in Java, when we create a variable, we need to specify what type it is. So there are many different types of variables that you can have in Java and programming in general. So first, a pretty easy one is int. So int is an integer, and you probably learned about them from your math class. So they're just any whole number. It could be negative, it could be 0. In Java, we can set integers as any whole number from this number, which is around negative 2 billion, to positive 2 billion around. The reason for this exact number is because it's a 32-bit integer. You don't actually have to know that, but I mean, if anyone was wondering. If you want a value that's greater than or less than this max and min values, you can use a long. And longs are 64-bit integers, so they can be anywhere from this, which is a huge number, all the way to this, which is, I think that's like quintillion. Wow. But if you need something bigger than int, you can use a long. So int and long are our two variable types for integers. And we create them by saying int or long, right? The data type, and then a name for it. So this name we can call later if we want to modify the variable or find its value, but we need a name for it to actually to store the value in. So I named this integer number, and then I set it equal to 1. So uh, I just use the data type, the name, and then equal to 1. Whenever we create a variable in Java or use this equal sign to set something equal to something else, the left side will always be set equal to the right side. So in this case, the number will be equal to 1. So if I switch these around, it wouldn't work. So I need to put the variable on the left side and the value on the right side. And the same applies for all of the different variable types. Next, we go on to our two variable types for decimals, which are float and double. Floats are decimals that are 6 to 7 decimal places large, and doubles are much more accurate, which can go up to 15 to 16 decimal places. One thing to note is that when you create a float, you have to use this F letter at the end of the number to tell the computer that this variable is in fact a float. Doubles take up more memory than floats because they are a larger variable type, but because the programs that we're going to be making in this tutorial series aren't going to be extremely complex, we can just use doubles for simplicity. The next type of variable are booleans. So booleans can be either true or false. And as you see, I set this decision variable equal to false. And I could also set it equal to true, right? The last two variable types are strings and characters. So strings are a group of characters that are inside of these quotes. So right here, I just have the words hello world inside these quotes and setting that to the string words. So a character, on the other hand, is just a single character. So that could be like a single letter or it could be a single number, but they have to be inside these single quotes. So when declaring a type of variable, you need to identify its type as shown above. And here's the template. It's the data type, and then the name, and then optionally you can add a value that it's initialized to. So you may ask, why is it optional? Why would you want a variable that isn't initialized to anything? So this variable, I just set it as uninitialized. So if you don't initialize the value will become null. And the reason why we wouldn't want to initialize it is because it becomes a placeholder value or a placeholder variable. So we may need this variable later on, but we may not know the value right now. The thing is, it's somewhat risky to not initialize a variable because if you try to modify it later, then it'll throw an error. So make sure that you always initialize your variables somewhere in the code to prevent errors. So that moves us on to how do we set already created variables. So as we see, this uninitialized variable is now being initialized to 2 later on by just using this equal sign, just like we used here. But in this case, we don't declare it a certain type because we already know that uninitialized is an integer. Whenever we update or set a variable, we don't need to say what the type is because it already knows. Only when we create the variable does the program not know which type it needs and actually needs you to clarify it. There's also other ways to modify the variables. So if we have an integer, we can use plus plus or minus minus to either increment or subtract 1 from the variable. So uninitialized is 2 right here. After this line, it'll be 3, and after this line, it'll go back down to 2. If I want to add 10 to the variable, then I can use this plus equals sign. And that's the same thing as saying uninitialized equals uninitialized plus 10. So that just adds 10 to the variable. So after this, it goes from 2, and from this, it goes to 12. And the same thing goes for minus equals. It's the same thing as uninitialized equals uninitialized minus 10. So that just subtracts 10. So it goes from 2 to 12 back down to 2. The final thing that I want to cover in this lesson are print statements. So print statements are just what we do to print something out to the console and show the user what the program is doing. So I can actually print out both variables and strings to these print statements. The way that I do a print statement in Java is this kind of long line, which is system.out.println. And then in parentheses, you can put whatever you want to print, which could be a variable or a string. So in this line, I print out words, which as you can see here is equal to hello world. And then here, I print out a decimal, which is equal to 153.2. And then in the next line, I say hello world again. So as you see from when I run this, the first 3 lines here, hello world, the decimal that I printed out, and then hello world again. I have other print statements later on in the code, which is what all this other rest of it is, but these 3 lines are doing these 3 things, which is what we expected. A nice handy shortcut in Eclipse to get a print statement is saying sysout and then control space. One last thing that I'd like to add is that you can chain together strings and variables in a single print statement. You can do this using the plus symbols. So for example, if I want to print out the variable uninitialized with a little prompt before it, I'll say uninitialized is equal to, and I can say colon space, and then I say plus, and then the actual variable uninitialized. So if I do this, then when I run it, you can see that it says uninitialized is equal to 2, which is what we expected. Doing this is called string concatenation. There's more complex ways of doing it that'll give you better control over how you concatenate these strings, but this is a pretty easy and basic level of how to do it. That's all I have to say about comments and variables for this lesson. If you like this, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. I'll have more lessons in this series coming out soon, so if you don't want to miss them, make sure to subscribe. Anyway, that's it. See you in the next one.